Why the major parties deserve all the hatred they are getting. Coming up on this week's Citizens Report. Welcome to the Citizens Report for the 18th of June 2026. I'm Elisa Barwick. Joining me today is Citizens Party National Chairman Robert Barwick. Welcome, Robbie.
Thanks, Elisa. Also today on our updates, defeat the draconian ASIO bill this week. AUKUS inquiry says sovereign agency trashed, and KPMG gets a deserved serve.
Now, help us get the word out by liking the show, making a comment below. Of course, you can subscribe if you're not already a subscriber and ring the notification bell to get all of our updates. And you can look in the information box below for further information on all the topics we're discussing today, and most importantly, links to follow the instructions on how you can help us with crucial interventions like hitting and smashing the AUKUS. Definitely the AUKUS topic, but also I was going to say the ASIO bill, which is coming up in the Senate this week. All right, so starting with our major topic, why the major parties deserve all the hatred they are getting. So we're going to talk today about the fact that the major parties are getting smashed on every issue, left, right and centre, but they refuse to adjust. They refuse to even slightly adjust, let alone change the narrative, and they just keep ploughing ahead with the kinds of policies that are going to be the death of their parties. And
Elisa, they're so institutionalised into their uni-party corruption that they've always, what's happened with the major parties is they've always been able to, they appeal to their base to win elections, and then in order to keep power, they do all these corrupt deals all the time, and especially deals with big sexual interests, etc. And they got away with it because for years, decades, they thought, well, like the Liberals would say, they say their base is small business, right? So they tell small business, this is what we're going to do for you. And when they get in, they do nothing but serve big business. Yeah. Labor, the same thing, say to the workers, this is what we're going to do for you. And when they get in, they do nothing but serve big business, right? And they do it together. And we're going to talk about the cash issue in a minute, because when issues come up where they have to put down a rebellion, they'll both side with each other in the chamber and put it down, right? And they get away with it because the Labor said, the workers always vote for us. And Liberals said, the small businesses will always vote for us. That's broken. They're not. They're all going to one nation, right? And in the face of that, it's like they're so institutionalised, they do not know how to do the one thing, Elisa, that would get voters back, which is actually serve them. Yeah. They don't know how to do it, and we've got a great example.
The pathway out is so obvious, it's not funny. It's just like they're frozen. They're locked into these uniparty guardrails. They just can't even contemplate going outside of that.
And part of the reason actually is because they're a product. Everyone in the parliaments for these two major parties are a product of it. They didn't come from working backgrounds. They didn't come from... Someone will say, we were small business. Yeah, rubbish. They came through as professional politicians. Both sides have been fed up through as professional politicians. It's all they know. And so these parties deserve to go extinct. They deserve everything that's happening to them.
But in the meantime, we need a real alternative. We'll get to that in a moment because, look, one of the areas where this is most obvious is the very, very popular matter of resurrecting bank branches and saving cash. And this is something on which, we campaign. We had a very successful inquiry on the incredible rate of closure of bank branches, where the banks were just saving themselves millions of dollars and putting it all on post offices, and local towns are shutting down. I mean, this has ravaged Australia, and it's a huge, huge issue. And yet the findings of the inquiry that we participated in, which recommended examining the need for a public bank, has not been commented on by the government. It's sat there.
They're ignoring it.
And the coalition, which had claimed it was supportive of this and was going to push for various facets of this, has done nothing. The government put up a faux bill to protect cash payments, and then the coalition was going to oppose that, but then they backflipped on it we'll hone in on that a little bit more. But of course, then after they backflipped, they said, "Oh, we'll put up our own bill to save cash," and that was months back, and they still haven't been forthcoming on that.
Yeah, it was an act of treachery in the Parliament, in the Senate back in March. Now we want to play a video clip that our friend Ramesh made from our show back then about Michaelia Cash, right? Because Michaelia Cash, a week after Liberal Senator Slade Brockman from Western Australia got up in the chamber and said that the coalition would support the motion to send the cash disallowance, cash acceptance mandate disallowance motion, which was designed to send it back to the Treasurer and say, this is utter garbage what you've come up with here.
Yeah.
Back to you were going to make the cash problem worse with this. Back to the drawing board. Slade Brockman announced the coalition supports it. A week later, Michaelia Cash gets up and announces the opposite. So this is a 2.5 minute clip though, and just to remind people what happened, but Ramesh actually did a really good job in honing in on the essence of the betrayal, the treachery that you could see literally in Michaelia Cash's face. Have a look.
Is Michaelia Cash Australia's most dishonest politician? Labor and Liberal do a sneaky deal to restrict cash and then gaslight about it. They thought we wouldn't notice. We did.
The biggest shock was that the Liberals got up first and made it clear that they had a different position than they had a week before. And the person speaking on the Liberal behalf is Senator Michaelia Cash. She pretended she's taking the pro-cash position. A few minutes later, she finishes her speech with the same Mrs. Lovejoy routine. But this is really important for the viewer, that if our video editor is good enough, he might be able to zoom in. Look at her face as she's speaking. And what you'll notice is that she's acting all sincere and emotional.
Yeah.
Look at her looking across the table to the Labor Party, her supposed enemies, and you can tell this is all a charade, this is an act. Look at her face very closely and look at the expression on her face. She almost winks to them.
Australian Parliament, do not take away from us when we so desperately need it. That one legal right that we have.
Legal right that we have.
One legal right that we have.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
And that is the ability to walk into Coles, to walk into Woolies, to walk into the servos and to actually use cash.
Oh, stop. Think of the children.
And to the Greens and to One Nation who mock me and laugh at what I say, shame on you. Because the outcome is you don't support cash and you don't support the right of those Australians.
A few moments later.
Then we'll play it right to the end and look what Michaelia Cash does when she sits down and gestures to the same person. Play the tape.
Well, thanks very much, President. Look, firstly, I want to be very...
Amazing.
This is a charade, Elisa.
Yeah.
This is the charade between the bankers' parties that's going to kill cash in Australia. But what Liberals have done here is now allowed the Labor Party to say, oh, we've dealt with that issue. People want a cash mandate, we've done it. That's it, it's off the agenda. That's what she's done. Obviously, there was some kind of internal struggle in the coalition about this, right? And the people who've won that struggle, you can see by her behaviour, it's all fake, it's all a charade. These people serve the banks. It's the banks who want to do away with cash. These people serve them first and foremost, they always have. That's uni-party code you just saw there.
Vote out Michaelia the failure in Western Australia at the 2028 federal election.
Yeah, so people would remember that. But as you said, Elisa, at the time, to placate the masses, Michaelia Cash announced, we agree this is a garbage mandate. Now remember what the mandate is, just a quick aside, right? 1st of January, Jim Chalmers introduced regulations, as with certain powers he has as Treasurer, to say that they call it a cash acceptance mandate, that businesses must accept cash payments. Now, you say, well, why do you have to do that? Well, because when they drafted the laws, passed the laws in the 1960s, the last time they passed laws relating to currency, because we adopted decimal currency, no one could foresee a future where businesses would not want to accept money. because all money was in cash, right? And because technology has changed, the laws have to catch up with it. So they said, okay, we'll have a cash acceptance mandate. Now you can go right around the world and see where cash is accepted. You wrote reports on this. All the Scandinavian countries are bringing in cash acceptance mandates, etc. We visited China. China has probably got the best cashless infrastructure in the world, yet every business must accept cash, right? They will get fined by the government if they don't accept cash, even though it's a small percentage of transactions. They must accept it. Why? Because the Chinese government says cash is legal tender, and therefore you accept legal tender.
And they fine you if you don't accept it, if you're caught.
So these are real mandates to make sure that cash is preserved. So what did Jim Chalmers come up with? He came up with a mandate that only applied to fewer than 1% of businesses, supermarkets and retail fuel stores, only applied up to $500, and only applied between 7 o'clock in the morning and 9 o'clock at night, right? So it was a fake mandate that was worse than no mandate at all. That's why we said this is garbage. It's going to hasten the demise of cash. And even though it was so narrow, there's even provisions in the regulations that say those businesses that are mandated can apply for an exemption.
Yeah.
Under what circumstance? If they're not close enough to a bank branch. And see, right there, Elisa, was the problem, right? The problem was the government was not wanting to address the real issue, which has caused all the problems with cash, which is bank branch closures. Because that would mean standing up to the banks. And the banks, they're allowed to get away with whatever they bloody want to, right? So they came up with this utter garbage. Dale Webster reported last week or the week before in the regional. You can look up their website, the regional. But guess what? A bunch of those businesses are going to the ACCC and applying for the exemption. Yeah,
they've been flooded.
Right? Even though the cash problem out there is still huge. 2 weeks ago on the King's birthday weekend, the town of Casterton in Western Victoria, which has its biggest event that weekend, the Kelpie Muster, right? It's the biggest gathering of Kelpie dogs in Australia, probably the world, because it's an Australian dog. So it's a big event for the town. This is a town that used to have 4 banks, all the big 4 branches. Now they've got no banks, they've got 1 ATM, and the ATM was on the blink for the biggest event in the town, annual event in the town, and so the local post office had to open for the weekend to save the event, right?
Yep, yet again the post office has to step in.
The post office has to step in. But this sort of thing is being repeated all around Australia, right? Because these weak snivelling weasels in Parliament, in the major parties, refuse to look at the banks that are the most profitable banks in the world and say, you bastards are going to spend about $1 billion extra that you don't want to spend in maintaining a branch network across Australia. Out of your $40 billion gross profit, you should spend about $1 billion more in maintaining a branch network. They don't want to do that. That's too unreasonable, even though we subsidise the banks, etc. So that's the state of play. And so Michaelia Cash said, here, people, we are going to draft a bill that it'll be a private member's bill, and this bill will make the cash mandate better. That's what she promised. Now, we should play right here, actually, the clip from Nick McKim, because Nick McKim was in that debate, the Green senator, and he responded specifically to that point that she had, right, where she promised what this bill would do. So just play the clip.
Because in an attempt to make it seem like they're not letting the government off the hook, the Leader of Opposition Business has just revealed in her speech the Liberals are going to table a private senator's bill on this matter, which will no doubt contain a broader cash mandate than currently exists. Now, we all know what's going to happen there. If it's a decently drafted bill and it does contain a broader mandate, I'm not going to speak for One Nation, but you'd assume they'd support it. We'll have a look at it. You could assume we'll support it too. And it will get through the Senate. And you know what's going to happen then? It's going to go down into the House and it's going to die a miserable, lonely death down there, and it'll never be brought on for debate because the government's got the numbers down there, so it'll never become law. What you could have done was vote for this disallowance today and force the government back to the table to bring in an appropriate mandate on cash that was far more broad in scope to the one that they're currently proposing. And the reason they're not going to be forced back to the table is because the opposition have squibbed it.
So as you can see, Nick McKim said it's not going to work anyway. But okay, that's what they promised. Where's the bill?
Yeah, exactly.
They lied.
Yep.
They had no intention of doing it. This was just their way to placate the people that they knew they'd angered in a way they'd always got away with.
Yep. But I want to make this point because, you know, the implications of this behaviour will no longer be tolerated, obviously, by the population. And so we wanted to cite the analysis by Kos Samaras in his recent article of the type of people that are moving to become One Nation voters, because he highlighted the role of bank branch closures.
Yep.
This is what he said. The founding One Nation voter of this cycle was not young and broke. He, and increasingly she, was older, a baby boomer on the senior edge of Gen X, Australian born, who owned the home outright or was within sight of it. In the narrow cash flow sense, this voter was not poor. The mortgage was gone. What had gone with it was a sense that the world they grew up in and raised families in had gone to, not replaced, but declined. The paid-off home sits in a part of Australia that has been quietly stripped of institutions, industry and services. Since 2017, around 37% of the country's bank branches have closed. In the space of 3 years, more than 600 towns were left with no banking service at all. In the Riverina alone, 22 towns have lost their last bank, and Grenfell lost all 4 of the majors. That's just to mention one. So in the face of that, and we know, we've quoted on this show, run clips before of Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, saying he supports public banks and wouldn't have privatised the Commonwealth.
He wouldn't have privatised it.
We have had discussions with people at the top of, I think, every major party in this country specifically about a public bank that could be run through post offices, who have said, well, that's a good idea, or I like that idea, or I've long supported that idea. But why can't they? I mean, Michaelia Cash might say, you know, why won't they think of the children? I want to say, won't they take on the banks? You know, this is the point. They won't push on this front because it breaches up against the big banks and the control they have over this country.
Yeah, it just means that they deserve everything they're getting, right? And even, so just divide the 2 parts. Just take the cash issue as one issue and the public bank issue as another issue. Just even the cash issue, it's an immensely popular issue. Australians do not want to lose cash. Right? Even those who don't use it very much, they know they don't want to lose. They don't want to lose it. They don't want to lose the privacy. They don't want to lose the reliability. And if you live in regional Australia, it's the whole ball game in many cases. We were in the town of Junee for the hearing in 2023, and one of the businessmen in the town who owns a local chocolate factory, he was talking about the Optus outage that had brought Sydney to its knees for half a day, you know, a month or so earlier, right? When Optus went out in 2023, and he said, we have that 4 times a week here. Right? You've got to have cash. You've just got to have it. So in this case, it's a low bar for the coalition. They promised a bill.
Yeah.
Where is it? Now, Matt Canavan is one of those leaders. Matt Canavan got elected. The coalition turned to him out of desperation to try and win back support from One Nation. He chaired the inquiry into bank branch closures, by the way. He recommended that there should be an expert panel to establish look at establishing a public bank. He recommended that access to banking services and cash should be an essential service. He's now the head of the party. He hasn't said a word. He communicated to me when they backflipped on this cash thing. He said, "Oh, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater." That is the most uni-party thing anyone's ever said, right? Oh no, Rob, we've got to go along with this, right? But we're going to come up with a private members bill. Where is it? Because they were BSing the public, Elisa, right? And that's why, if they do, I'm now saying, I'm looking at these guys and say, you actually don't know how to serve the public.
No.
Right? It's like the saying, some people can't tell a lie, some people can't tell the truth, some people can't tell the difference. And this is the problem with how institutionalised these major parties actually are.
I mean, yes, exactly. It indicates that the entire political system to which they're entrenched has to be overthrown. And a key element of that is the corporate control that is wielded over the political parties. And so, you know...
The bickies that the corporations throw the major parties, the literal crumbs in exchange for rivers of gold from us.
Now, so we want to play a short clip here from our Senate candidate from the last federal election and University of Wollongong professor and expert in this area of corporate control over politics and the nation as a whole, Professor Andy Shmulo, talking about how we need to cut out the big corporate donors that, you know, because of their largesse, are able to dictate policies to the parties. And this was at a recent Citizens Party event, so watch this.
But the important stuff, why are there potholes in the roads? Why are we earning more money from beer sales than gas exports? Why are we paying so much tax and multinationals are coming to this country and earning billions of dollars in revenue and paying no tax? To those problems, there are solutions. So why don't we put those solutions into practice? The reason is because the two major parties cannot compete with each other without huge amounts of money. Every time there's a federal election, all of the parties together spend $250 million fighting those elections. Now, you know, we bandy these figures around million and billion, and they lose impact and they lose meaning. Do you know how long it would take you to count to 1 million at one number per second? 11 days. Do you know how long it would take you to count to 1 billion at one number per second? 32 years. So every 3 years, we're spending $250 million fighting elections. And where does that money come from for the two major parties? The mining companies, the unions, the banks, the insurers, the gas exporters, the gaming and gambling companies. And so that money goes into the coffers of the Liberal Party and the Labour Party. And it is so cynical that when money is donated to these parties, the donors donate the exact same amount to each party. It's a bet each way. Like, I cannot stand the sight of Gina Rinehart, but at least Gina Rinehart only donates to the Liberal Party. PricewaterhouseCoopers donates $4 million to the Liberal Party and the Labour Party. It's not an ideological thing. It's not that they like the one party's values or the one party's principles or the one party's ideology. It's just a blatant buying of democracy. And it's a very profitable thing to do. The PricewaterhouseCoopers was donating $4 million a year to the Liberals and to Labour, and in return getting $600 million of taxpayer-funded consultancy work a year. What on?
We should donate a lot more than that then.
Have you ever heard of an investment better than that? For $4 million, you get $600 million.
Yeah.
And these shonky shysters, while they were getting $600 million worth of taxpayer-funded projects, were screwing the taxpayer by showing multinationals how to come to Australia and pay no tax. It's outrageous. And there are people in the Liberal Party and there are people in the Labour Party who trust me because I work with them. They are sick of it. But there's nothing they can do. Because if you dare go against your donors, if the gas companies give you money, if the mining companies give you money, and you turn around and you say, you know what? It's all over social media. It's everywhere in the media. Australia earns more tax revenue from selling beer than selling our natural gas. We've got to start taxing the gas companies. People in the caucus will turn around to that member and say, we can't upset them. They are donors. If we upset them, the $4 million they've given us next year, they won't give us any. they'll give 8 million to the Liberal Party and we'll lose. Every dollar buys a vote.
And he's really nailed it there, Elisa. This is the dynamic that's in. As he said, he made reference to the fact there are good people in these major parties. If you met them, you know, if they were on the sideline with you while your kids are playing soccer or footy or tennis or whatever, right? You'd be great mates. You know, they're just normal people. But in the realm of politics, they're institutionalised, right? And so all they know is this system where they've both got to appeal to the same big corporate donors, and it's a totally corrupting process. And of course, our party years ago put out a policy saying that we should have no corporate donations in politics at all. Yep. The only people who should be able to donate money in politics are individuals.
Yep.
So not corporations, because they're donating shareholders' money, not their own. That's other people's money. Not unions, right, that are donating their members' money. What the unions could do if they were genuine, they could say to their members when they pay their dues, do you tick this form if you agree that part of your membership dues should go to the Labor Party. And they don't want to do that because they'd be afraid of how many wouldn't tick the form, right? Because they don't like the Labor Party.
And they need the money in their pocket.
Yeah, no, exactly. And what because of compulsory superannuation, unions, even though they only represent 13% of the workforce now, they've never been richer because of the industry super funds and how they're tied up with the union movement. So they're completely disconnected from the reality out there. And so it shouldn't be allowed. Why should donations be made where the money comes from someone who's not actually making the decision to do it? That's our policy, and it's why we're not for sale.
Yeah. And you have to ask the question, despite what we read there from Cos Samaras about the people that are supporting One Nation, and despite the obvious mass of the population moving in that direction, whether there will be any difference there because of the big corporate donations that everyone is aware One Nation receives.
Well, that's the question. And I want to play a clip from yesterday's National Press Club appearance by Pauline Hanson, because, you know, in general, Pauline and her supporters would consider it a success, and she handled herself mostly very well because she's just stuck to her themes, etc. But see, the question I have for the viewers who are looking at this One Nation phenomenon at the moment is, whatever, you know, while on the one hand it's exciting that the major parties are heading off the cliff, you know, and people really hate those major parties. It's exciting. Now we're at the point of saying, well, hang on, what change is the alternative going to bring? Because what she didn't talk about at that press club address, while she's talking about her favourite themes, and in a sense, her tendency is to point sideways, get you to look sideways at other people who are in this economy with you but are different to you, right? Now she'll rationalise it in different ways, and sometimes you got to, you know, there might be, you know, like who wants to have terrorists in the neighbourhood, all this kind of stuff, right? That's what it's sort of reduced to, but it sets up other problems in the sense that, well, who you know, if you just start looking at people because they look different to you, okay, you can look at that, but what aren't you looking at? Because that's what I want to highlight. What aren't you looking at? Because she didn't talk about the banks, she didn't talk about the two big supermarkets, she didn't talk about the three insurance companies. She didn't talk about the 3-company gas cartel. She didn't talk about the 2 airlines, right? I.e., these sections of the public, these sections of the economy that are concentrated in just a handful of corporations who've never made more profits. They've never made bigger profits in their history, while we're in a cost of living crisis. She never talked about that.
Yeah, they're more responsible for the problems we face every day than
and
what
every
she
day
identified.
when you're out there suffering that cost of living crisis, that immigrant who has difficulty speaking English is in the same cost of living crisis as you.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't mean to go into this, but I do want to put up this clip from SBS, because SBS is so woke. they decided to do a profile. Well, they reported a study that did a profile of company directors in Australia. And when people talk about multicultural versus monocultural, because she said we're monocultural, according to these figures that SBS highlighted last week, have a look at the graph there, the image. 6.5% of all company directors in Australia, Elisa, are not Anglo-Celtic. 6.5%. So 93.5% of all company directors in Australia are Anglo-Celtic. In other words, the people running these corporations that are screwing us, they are a monoculture. They're us, right? There's not multiculturalism that's taking the money out of your pockets. It's these people running these corporations. And she didn't mention any of that. Anyway, so that's just one particular issue that I wanted to highlight in that regard. But she was then asked, and I think to me this comes down to the nub of the issue. She was asked a question by Tom Connell relating to election funding, right? Because you've heard what Andy Schmuller said. So listen to the question and then listen to her instant response.
You talk a lot about the big two parties. There's an easy way to be more transparent than them. You could commit to telling us, the voters, I'm not just the journalists, the voters, how your campaign will be paid for before it happens. So release your donations if you like. Would you do that and show everyone that you're more transparent than the major parties?
So you want me to act differently to the major political parties?
My question is, Elisa, is yes. Isn't that what we want? Aren't the people of Australia who are turning against the major parties wanting the alternative to be different to the major parties?
Exactly.
Isn't that the point? And so if that is her instant response to that, because this is the area that people keep getting increasingly curious about, Pauline likes to say, if I'm taking big money from Gina Reinhardt, it means I'm not taking taxpayer money. Trust me, she takes plenty of taxpayer money. It means I'm not taking taxpayer money. Yeah, but Pauline, the issue there is what Andy went through. Mm-hmm. Who is influencing you? Who are the vested interests? What are the vested interests that are influencing you? And we do, Australians, if they want a difference, if they truly want a difference, they should demand that the alternative be different. And so far,
absolutely.
Well, that's an open question.
All right, now we've got some other updates, but here's how you can join the Citizens Party.
You deserve a future where the people, not entrenched power, determines Australia's direction. That's why you should join the Citizens Party. You need post offices and regional bank branches to remain open. A government that invests in people, not submarines that will never arrive. And a foreign policy that's in our national interest. We've stopped the cash ban legislation and led the fight to hold major banks to account. Tens of thousands of Australians have signed our petitions, and it's made a real difference. It's time for action as we push towards our goal of 10,000 members. Join the Citizens Party at citizensparty.org.au and be part of the movement that's shaping Australia's future.
Defeat the draconian ASIO bill this week. So the Senate sits on Monday, Robbie, and we know that we should recap just what this bill is first. So the ASIO bill is a bill that's been around for a long time and it's been renewed constantly.
According to the Prime Minister, it's like that. It's a law like the Nazis.
That's right.
He said that 23 years ago before he became the guy enforcing the law like the Nazis.
It gives our secret agencies, namely the intelligence agencies, the power to do policing. So it's a secret police. Anyway, they wanted to take away the sunset clause so that it became permanent and make the powers broader for ASIO. Now, we ran a huge campaign and that was largely watered down, and the government actually took out that removal of the sunset clause and said, we won't worry about that. But I'll just say, look, we need to keep ringing our senators, people, because Liberal Senator Susan McDonald wrote a letter to one of our activists on the 12th of June, so this was just a week ago, long since they...
LNP actually, so she's probably she's probably national.
But this letter was written long after the government made that decision to get rid of the removal of the sunset clause.
She didn't get the memo.
And she said in the letter, it removes the sunset clause. Instead of Parliament having to actively renew the powers every few years, they become permanent. So she's still on the old version.
This is another example of what we were talking about before, right? This is uniparty incompetence. She hasn't even caught up with the reality of this bill. We have defeated the attempt to remove the sunset clause. We've stopped them from normalising it. The rest of it will be debated next week. And what we're hoping for is that it's a huge debate, because otherwise it would have been a non-debate at all. They just would have waved it through. So I'm confident we would have generated a very big debate. And the question, there will be a bunch of amendments put up, and the question is whether they'll get up. And hopefully the amendments will include ditching the part where these powers apply to children, right? Because they shouldn't apply. Even ASIO 2 years ago said they didn't need the powers to interrogate kids. They've never used them. And then suddenly, from an inexplicable reason, ASIO changed its mind. So that's not good enough, right? So get rid of the power to interrogate kids. And we're also saying, these things require a warrant, but the warrant comes from the Attorney General, so that's a politician approving the interrogation. And that shouldn't be. In a democracy like ours, you're supposed to have what's called the separation of powers, and you're supposed to go to the judiciary for the warrant. And given that, unless ASIO is lying, by its own figures, it's only used these interrogation warrants 20 times in 23 years. So requiring ASIO to get a warrant from a judge is not an onerous requirement, right? Get a judge to approve, not a politician. You go down that path where politicians can start approving, policing powers that are so excessive as these. There's a good reason Albanese likened them to the Nazis when he gave a speech in 2003. So get a warrant from a judge.
Yeah, so you can find out more detail in our video, which we'll link below. It's inching towards 1 million views, and thanks for helping us share it, which we asked you to do last week. But refresh yourself and ring your senator. We need particularly to put the heat on the coalition. All right. AUKUS inquiry says sovereign agency trashed. Now, last week on the show, we spent quite a bit of time talking about the fact that there's a revolt in the Labor Party. This is yet another issue where the party itself is overturning itself and the leadership can't respond. So there's a public inquiry. They had their first hearing this time a week ago, and we mentioned that you would be there and you did get to speak. So give us a bit of a sense of what took place.
Well, first of all, we're going to play a couple of clips, but not the clip of me speaking. That's already on our YouTube channel. Hopefully, if you haven't watched it yet, just look at that. It only goes for a few minutes. But I was able to tie, in my comments, I hit ASPI, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, because it's funded by the American and British governments and the biggest American and British weapons companies. And they're all the ones that are making money out of AUKUS. Right, and what ASPI did, by their own admission for the last 10 years, is whip up the fear about China, the fear and hatred of China, that when AUKUS came up as an idea, Australians had been incited to think, oh, we're so scared of China, we need to shell out $368 billion to these countries to buy these submarines to protect us. And so I hit that, and I also hit the fact that Dan Duggan is also a victim of AUKUS, right? But we won't go into the details there, just have a look at that clip. The real power of what happened at the inquiry, though, Elisa, was Gareth Evans. So Gareth Evans is, love him or hate him, he's a foreign policy expert, this is his area. So you've got to understand this from internal Labor Party politics, right? Albanese was such an utter coward in 2021 when Scott Morrison called him up and said, I've got to tell you something, I have hatched up this harebrained plot with Boris Johnson and Mike Pompeo to hand over $368 billion to the Americans to buy their submarines initially and then get the Brits to build other submarines. And you have 24 hours to agree to it because Joe Biden has said he requires you to agree to it because he wanted to make sure it was bipartisan in Australia. And if you don't agree with it, I'm going to call you weak on national security during the election campaign. And that coward went to water and he agreed with it. He did not consult his party, didn't even consult the caucus or whatever. He just agreed to it. And what happened is among the rank and file, the Labor Party, there was a lot of upset people like, what garbage is this? And as the deal has become evident and the details have come out, and it's such a garbage deal, Elisa. The rebellion has grown bigger, right? Because a big part of the deal that people have reacted to, put aside even the ideology and politics of it, we're not going to get the subs. We have agreed to it. We signed a deal where we will keep paying and paying and paying, and the British and the Americans are under no obligation to actually deliver. And at a certain point, they can give us 12 months' notice and say, oh, this is not going to work, and we don't get our money back. Just from a business deal alone, it was crazy. So anyway, that has fueled this rebellion inside Labor's ranks. So finally, you got this inquiry. Gareth Evans, as a real heavyweight, not someone, he's not a Green who's against nuclear power or anything. He didn't come out from that. He came out from a very sharp foreign policy analysis. And it's got a lot of attention, as it deserves to. This is very, very damaging for Labor, for Albanese, for Richard Marles, and for AUKUS in general. So we want to play just a couple of clips. One is, this is Gareth Evans talking very importantly about the sovereignty aspect. He hit sovereignty and explained how this really undermines our sovereignty. Have a look.
So, the ultimate crazy irony is that with AUKUS and its associated commitments, Australia is spending an eye-watering amount to build a capability to defend us from a military threat, which in fact is most likely to arise simply because we have that capability and are using it to fight alongside the United States in a conflict in which it's not in our interest to engage without any guarantee of support in return, should we ever need it. The sovereign agency issue. Australian governments will always insist that they maintain full control as to how the AUKUS assets are used, and that will always remain the case on paper. But the reality is otherwise and will rapidly become apparent if and when serious tensions arise. It simply defies credibility to think that Washington will ever go ahead with its sale of Virginias to us or allow the further access to highly sensitive nuclear technology that's involved in the SSN AUKUS follow-on project in the absence of any understanding that we will deploy those boats to join the US in any fight in which it chooses to engage anywhere in our region, particularly over Taiwan. Are we all meant to simply ignore Kurt Campbell's observation I've already quoted, that we have them locked in now for the next 40 years? Or Elbridge Colby's statement just before he was appointed to the senior policy role in the Pentagon, that delivery of any Virginias to Australia would be highly imprudent without, quote, an ironclad guarantee that they can be deployed at the will of the United States? Or are we meant to just ignore Eli Ratner's statement, the Biden administration's lead on the Indo-Pacific in Canberra in February this year, a little bit more subtly but still unmistakably, his observation that there was, quote, a need for very serious and deep alliance conversations about our expectations around roles and missions. I've had a personal ministerial experience of being a junior allied partner of the United States in a hot conflict situation. That was the first Gulf War in 1991. And let me just say that my recollections about that experience are not pretty. Those who deny or ignore the loss of Australian sovereign independence that is necessarily involved in our commitment to the AUKUS submarine project are, in my judgment, simply defying reality. And those who accept the reality of our loss of sovereign agency, but actually applaud it as a price worth paying for our protection, as Michael Pezzulo, for one, has done in cheering what he describes as, quote, a pooling of sovereignty, unquote, in the face of a belligerent China. Sorry, that's the whole quote, pooling of sovereignty in the face of belligerent China. People who take that view seem to have lost not only any sense of national pride, but any sense of Australia's national interest.
And the other one, Elisa, is John Lander, our friend John Lander. I've interviewed on this show many times, the former ambassador. He was able to give testimony as well. And he tied AUKUS into this military build-up that's already underway in Australia, that's happened because of the deal that Obama initially did with Julia Gillard in 2011 to put the Marines in Darwin. And then that was extended in this thing called the Forced Posture Agreement that Abbott signed with Obama in 2014, under which we've essentially become occupied by the American military. And before we go to that clip, I just want to make a point. Richard Marles, a week before this hearing, said, oh, no, there's no danger of China invading Australia. And I'm thinking, oh, really? That is exactly what Aspie and you clowns tried to imply for years and years and years. That here's China, who has watched America in war after war after war bankrupt itself, invading countries, occupying them, losing a lot of personnel, treasure and blood doing this, right? And China's looking at that and going, why would we want to do that? China looks at Australia, has all these resources it needs. China just does the maths. It's basic maths. We pay quite a few $100 billion a year for their resources, or we go and invade Australia to occupy them and spend quite a few $1 trillion a year to do that. Even if you think Chinese people are not nice at all and are not human and somehow something to be scared of, you have to admit they're the best in maths at the world. Look at all the maths competitions. They win every time. Maths alone says they've got no interest in invading Australia. So Richard Marles finally admitted that. But then he said, what the real issue is, we have to protect our sea lanes. Gareth Evans made this point, that the Virginia-class submarines that are going to be at the Stirling base in WA, they're there for one reason, so that they can go and cut off China's sea lanes from oil ships going through the Malacca Straits to China. Do you know China has never, ever threatened to close sea lanes because it's the most dependent on them? Yeah. But the Americans always talk about closing China's sea lanes, and Gareth Evans identified, hang on, we would be party to that from the subs in WA, shutting off their sea lanes, their oil supplies, which of course is an act of war. And that's why he said in the clip that we played that our involvement in AUKUS is going to cause the danger that we're supposedly protecting ourselves against. But just on the general principle of the military build-up in Australia, listen to John Lander tied into the Forced Posture Agreement.
AUKUS is not only or even mainly about submarines. It is about locking Australia in as a key base for American dominance in the Indo-Pacific in order to, quote unquote, contain China. I believe China is quite uncontainable, by the way. AUKUS cannot be considered in isolation from the Forced Posture Agreement with the United States. The Forced Posture Agreement effectively surrenders sovereignty to the United States because it provides, quote, unimpeded access to and exclusive use of all agreed areas and facilities. My understanding of this wording is that Australia will have no sovereign decision to determine when, where, and against whom United States assets based in Australia will be used. AUKUS is the spawn of the Forced Posture Agreement, which enables both it and the militarisation of Australia by the United States. Neither AUKUS nor the FPA are about the defence of Australia. They are for maintaining United States dominance in our region. Any American war against China would be launched from Australia because Australia is now, quote, the epicentre for the projection of US power in the Indo-Pacific, unquote. AUKUS makes the projection of that power more likely. Australia is consequently the epicentre for any retaliation against that power. The interchangeability of United States and Australian Defence Forces under these two agreements, much vaunted by Defence Minister Miles, further vitiates our sovereignty and reinforces the assertion that I made 2 years ago, which was ridiculed at the time, that the United States is not preparing to go to war against China. The United States is preparing Australia to go to war against China.
All right, so you can see there the clearest explication of the real issues, and those AUKUS hearings are continuing, and you can find out details. We'll put a link below to the website where you can make a submission, and you can even go along as ordinary people do to speak as well.
Please do. This inquiry needs a lot of support. Make a submission, and if there's a hearing in your area, go along.
Yep, now stay tuned for our last topic, which shows how KPMG is still in the hot seat, and they've even been threatened with jail time. But in the meantime, here's how you can find out more information about what we've talked about on the show.
The narrow agendas of mainstream media outlets are not telling you the full story. The weekly Citizens Party Australian Alert provides in-depth insights into issues that matter to all Australians. The Australian Alert holds a mirror to those in the halls of power, reporting on issues of national importance that are being buried by the major parties. It's reported on the misconduct of banks and major corporates, the persecution of those doing their jobs, and the failure of regulators to do theirs. Economic coverage puts real issues on the political agenda. There's serious analysis of global issues, the Washington Insiders report, and the global threat from endless wars. Everything you should know every week is in the Australian Alert. Subscribe today for hard copy and digital versions.
KPMG gets a serve. All right, we're going to feature our friend Andy a bit more here today, but just to note what's happening, KPMG will be back in the Senate hopefully tomorrow, although they've just sent a letter to the officials that are involved in this inquiry saying that they will not cooperate, and they've refused to hand over documents. And the Senate made this, we'll put up the headline here, and note that this headline actually changed. This is from the Australian. The original headline was "Jail Warning for Defiant KPMG," because the Senate even said jail, remember, jail time is possible if you refuse to front up to these committee hearings and actually say the truth. They have that compulsion there. So we'll see what happens, but the article from the Australian did quote our friend Professor Shmulo. It said, University of Wollongong Associate Professor Andy Shmulo criticised KPMG for attempting to protect its own information while allegedly misusing that of clients. This is what the scandal's about, them not investigating the claims of a whistleblower, about acting in a way that would benefit themselves by information from their clients. We discussed that on the show last week, so you can go back to look at that for more. But this is what they quoted Professor Shmulo saying, having trafficked in confidential client information, denied they'd done so, bullied the whistleblower out of the firm, but then claimed confidentiality over documents that show just how extensive their breach of client confidentiality was/is, the new Oxford Dictionary definition of chutzpah, Professor Shmulo said. Efficiently, it also serves as the Oxford Dictionary's new definition of hypocrisy. And I'll also note, because remember when they first came up, which I think we also discussed last week in a previous, during the inquiry into the other big regulator, what's it called, PwC, they were asked about their power maps, which mapped the interrelationship between this big consulting firm and all of the government departments.
Yeah, a power map is where a lobbyist like KPMG says, okay, this is the department. Here are all the key personnel in the department. This is our influence on each one of them. Yeah,
exactly.
Right?
I mean, pretty damning stuff. But it's just interesting that AFR, we'll put it up on the screen, ran this article today where they said, well, look at their power map over, I mean, they called it a power map, but the intersection with the corporate sector, and all the names you see there in bold are people that either came from the corporate sector into KPMG or went the other way, and the overlap between all these networks that they use, such as in this case we've just seen, and it's been discussed by the Senate right now, of using inside information and just, this complete slime mould of control within all of corporate Australia, which, as we said earlier, is what is funding our major political parties.
Yeah.
Now, we also have this video. This was where Andy was interviewed by ABC Business, where the clip situates it a bit more, but you'll see what he has to say there.
One of Australia's big four consulting firms has had a major leadership shake-up.
KPMG is being engulfed in a scandal.
There are calls to ban the firm from all government contracting work.
Consulting firm KPMG is in a world of trouble after allegations it misused confidential client information, covered up whistleblower claims and misled a parliamentary inquiry examining the sector.
We've now commenced a formal investigation.
Every Australian who has super should be concerned about what's going on in these big companies.
The CEO is gone and the firm is losing work.
The government will be examining all of the KPMG contracts in place.
KPMG audits the Reserve Bank, but it will no longer run a whistleblower hotline for the central bank.
We're going to be re-tendering for it.
There are also big questions about its ability to hold on to private clients. Well beyond companies like Optus and others it's alleged to have misused the data of in attempts to win new contracts.
Oh my God, this looks like it's just business as usual for these guys. This is how they operate.
In 2024, a former audit director raised concerns that confidential board papers from construction giant Lendlease were used to pitch for and win audit contracts for Westpac and Dexus. The firm spent 2 years and 3 investigations examining the whistleblower's claims, something it now says was not conducted with the necessary rigour. In March, with the protection of parliamentary privilege, Senator O'Neill aired the claims.
We'll continue to push this forward until we get a proper resolution of the safety that's necessary for our financial markets as an Australian economy.
The Big Four firms advise business and government and audit the books to make sure we can have confidence in the numbers.
Ernst & Young, Deloitte, KPMG and PwC have earned about $21 billion in taxpayer-funded contracts over the last 10 years.
Just a few years ago, PwC was slammed for misusing confidential government information to help multinationals avoid tax. The arm dealing with public contracts was sold off for $1, and PwC still hasn't worked for the federal government.
But it's not certain that KPMG will be carved up in the same way. When we talk about the big four firms, they used to be a big 8. Lessening competition in the vital area of audit is not something that regulators would like to see.
What we can expect is fireworks. Next Friday, more than 30 witnesses will be dragged to Canberra to give evidence about the scandal. That includes lawyers from the firms that investigated the whistleblower's claims, some of the clients whose data was breached, the deposed CEO, and more than a dozen other KPMG staff and associates. The Parliamentary Committee has already recommended that large partnerships like KPMG's and the consulting firms be regulated like companies.
Part of the reason why they've gone rogue is because they operate in a grey area where they are not subject to the law.
Something that looks increasingly likely.
That model has clearly failed. We cannot allow it to continue as it currently sits.
And Elisa, that goes to the very heart of what Andy was talking about funding of political parties in the first clip we used earlier in the show, right? Because there's some good senators in the parliament trying to take on these clowns, but when KPMG digs its heels in like it's done, I tell you what, it is relying. It's saying to it's thinking Deb O'Neill, Barbara Pocock, screw you guys, because in the back rooms of the Labor Party and the Liberal Party, we've got people that are going to be saying to you, stop doing this, right? These people give us money, stop doing it. So this is a real test. This particular thing is a real test for the parliamentary system. let's hope the senators prevail.
Yep, you have to break those strings of control from every which way. So that's the show for this week. Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.